And we're off and running.
Let's
Running
go.
routes. Running routes. Welcome back, everybody.
How we doing?
Eddie, how you doing over there?
I'm doing great. How's everybody doing?
Doing
Shout out
great.
to
I'm
the rest
doing
of the
great.
squad. Shout
Squad,
out shout out to the start of the season. Let's go.
get back to us. Get back to us. Um, Last show we did the AFC risers and fallers. This
Yes.
show we're gonna knock out the NFC risers and fallers.
Yes.
Um, Had some nice takes last time.
Yes.
Let's keep this thing rolling. What you say?
Yes. Let's get right into it. Speed round. Let's go.
All right,
We
let's
got
pop
the
into the.
defense of Dallas was very, very good last year. You could argue that it was the focal point of the entire team, doing incredible. Dak had some ups, some downs. Cooper Rush came in swinging them things. We looked good. It was a good year for Dallas. They fell short again, but it was still successful, and they're moving in the right direction. I think the defensive line getting Mozzie over here, getting that D tackle is going to really help them out. I think the D line and the defense is on the rise for Dallas. I think on the fall for Dallas is going to be Dak Prescott. I think Dak is not going to show up, and Dak's not going to show out this year. I think that potentially this could end up being, an issue for Dallas moving forward. I know, Charlie, you're high on him. We'll see what happens.
Little possible swap. Maybe they go back to Cooper Cup or Cooper Rush at some point during the season.
Oh, I don't know
Interesting.
about that. I mean,
Interesting.
we'll
I
see
mean,
if
because
he even plays. We'll see if he
he had
even
a
plays
rough
the whole year.
he had a rough year last year. I mean, it started the season getting injured the opening week, and he missed I think 5 games and had to watch the backup Cooper Rush come out of nowhere and lead the team to a I think it was 4-0, 5-0 record
Yeah,
during when Cooper was there.
yeah, they look
Um,
good.
quite a bit of pressure when Dak came back. For me, I'm buying the INT numbers coming down because I took all those things into consideration. We're gonna have a new guy calling the plays this year as well. There's gonna be a rededication to the run, which we saw was very dynamic with Tony Pollard. And I think Dak's going to be the beneficiary of that with a little bit more play action game. And you brought over a couple of weapons. I like, bringing over Brandon Cooks, a small guy that can find space. T.Y. Hilton added a little bit of juice, but I think Cooks will add a significant amount more to that offense. And for my sellers, kind of in the same page, but I just think the wealth is going to be spread around a little bit more than it typically has in the Dallas offense. Typically, it's been, after Amari Cooper left, it was CeeDee Lamb, CeeDee Lamb, CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz. And that was pretty much it up and down the field when it was come to pass catching options. I think Gallup being a full year off of his knee injury, and then you bring in over the before mentioned Brandon Cooks. I think the ball is going to be dispersed a little bit more. I like the 2 tight ends that they drafted last year, Ferguson being the lead guy. And then, of course, Tony Pollard catches the ball out of the backfield. All that said, I think CeeDee Lamb had a fantastic year last year, 1,300 yards receiving. I think that number comes back down a little bit. I'm not going to say it just falls off the block because I love CeeDee Lamb, but I'm thinking if there is a fall in Dallas, maybe those yards and the opportunities come down just a little bit because there's more options and because they're going to be a little bit more dedicated to the run. So I can see that happen. Dallas was tough to find because I mean they're a very very good team. They're definitely top 3 or 4 in the NFC, and there's not much question about that. It's how they do come playoff time that's always the bugaboo for them.
I agree.
But let's bounce to your New York G-men.
Yeah, I mean, this is a
Talk
this
to me.
is a tough this was a tough one too, because a lot of people stood up last year for the Giants to help them out and move forward. You had some flashes in the pan from Slayton. You had some flashes in the pan from the rookie Bellinger. You had some other guys on the squad come in and play well. And then you have some acquisitions this year. You can make an argument and a case that Darren Waller and his career could be on the rise because of coming over to the Giants. Fresh start, new face.
You
Excuse
got
me.
to feel like it's going to be a friendly situation for Darren
And you
Waller
got
because
the
I don't think he's
and
going to be as
you know
heavily
you got the
relied upon.
rookie, Jalen Waddle. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna end up saying I'm gonna go Isaiah Hodges, who was a practice squad guy and played for Buffalo, so he's very fond of the bowl, and they know what they're going to get out of the guy. He came in, he had 4 touchdowns in 8 games, 42 targets, 351 yards. I mean, I think for a guy to come in and just do the best he can, he did good, so he's going to get some looks this year, maybe some more camaraderie he's going to build with Daniel Jones. And I just think that they're just going to move forward and continue on this path of elevating each other. I think that he's just going to get better. I think not necessarily on the fall, on the downcline. I just think that you're going to end up being the odd man out, my odd man out, my downfall here. My faller, not my riser, is going to end up being Aaron Robinson, UCF cornerback out of UCF. I think that what's going to end up transpiring here because of all the DBs that we went and got. We went and got Banks in the first round. We went and got Trey Hawkins out of Old Dom. We drafted a kid out of Houston. We signed the safety from the Washington Commanders to try and give us some help. We had some guys on the roster from the year before. I'm just thinking that this regime didn't draft him. He's not an in-house guy. They didn't choose him. They accumulated him with the team. So I just think that potentially he could end up being the odd man out.
Yeah. First of all, love what the Giants are doing. I mean, building through the draft, bringing over pieces that fit the system. And you're right. As far as Isaiah Hodges, I remember last year when he kind of came on and had a couple of real good games. I was like, man, I'm scrambling to find out where, I don't remember seeing this kid. I don't, where to go to school at, just trying to get some info. And I was talking to you, and
Oregon,
you're like,
yeah.
I don't even know where he was either.
Yeah.
And very pleasant surprise. A kid that's got size. He showed
6'2".
hands. He was nice in the red zone. So I can't argue with it. That wide receiving room is wide open, and I think it's going to have risers and fallers as the season goes on.
For
To be
sure.
honest, I
Also,
think
the kid
everybody.
from Kentucky, you got to look out for the kid from Kentucky, the other Robinson on the different side of the trench there on the offensive side of the ball. You got the kid from Kentucky coming back from injury, but he fits the mold of the Jalen Waddle type guy, the short, burst, real quick off the line of scrimmage, little speedster, small guy, 5'8". We'll see what he can do if there's camaraderie between him and Daniel Jones. Really, that's what's going to transpire. Whoever has the camaraderie and ends up having that connection with Daniel Jones, those are going to be the starters. Those are going to be the guys. Unless you just get the Jalen Hyatt type dude who's going to come in and do that slant route and just open things up for the offense. I just think the Giants are moving in that direction. I think we overachieved last year, and I would be surprised if we made the playoffs this year.
Yeah, no. Opportunities are going to be spread across the board. But there's one thing for sure is that the new regime here coming over from Buffalo is heading in the right direction for y'all.
Who are your
Um,
risers and fallers for the Giants?
I looked at the Giants and I looked at the defensive unit first, and I think that it's going to be on the rise simply because of the acquisitions and the talent that was already there. Bringing over Nunez Roaches from the Buccaneers, bringing over Ashawn Robinson from the Los Angeles Rams, signing Bobby Okereke in free agency. I think all those guys matching in with what you got with DeMarcus Lawrence and Leonard Williams and Kayvon Thibodeau and all the guys
Ojulari.
that you got. You finally got some beef in there now, and I think your rush defense is going to be a lot better this season. I think a lot of those guys were getting pushed around, and the linebacking core wasn't as stout. There were a lot of injuries that you went through last year too, and availability is key. Even when you're talking about the wide receivers last year, whoever's left standing could be the guy that's breaking out on that side of the ball as well. But yeah, for me, you were ranked number 28th, 146 yards allowed per game last season, which is not your typical New York Giants style defense. So I expect that to drastically change because the
Listen,
first two, Roches and Ashawn, that's their bread and butter. So I like
listen.
that to change. And then as far as the fallers, this is going to be kind of similar to the CD Lamb thing, but with a little bit different twist. It's Saquon Barkley. I was high on him last year. I thought he was going to break out and have a very good season. I know you were a little bit more pessimistic on that, rightfully so, being a team that you love. But 1,300 yards last season, a little bit of draft capital invested in it, and I hope and I think that they realize that this team needs to be a little bit more balanced. You can tell by the offseason moves, bringing in wide receiver bodies. We saw flashes of Daniel Jones using his arm, making the right decisions last year. That game against Minnesota in the playoffs, some of the best football I've seen from a quarterback for a full game. Like, he was spectacular. He still used his athleticism. I was simply blown away. I was like, if this guy can bottle this game up and start to put together, watch out, because he was on fire. Every single read, he was
Yeah.
confident, and he was confident in who he was throwing the ball to. And as you alluded to, Isaiah Hodges, these guys were just, they were coming up off the out of the farm system here, and he
Cager
ran
was
the
another
show
one too. The tight end Cager. You had a bunch of guys that I just
for
never
sure,
heard of before.
for sure. Um, but again, back to Barkley with the 1,300 yards. I think that's going to come down for that reason because of Daniel Jones, and I think they're going to want to be a little bit more balanced and score a little bit more points. You guys still struggled sometimes. You were in all close games, and that was because of defense and running the ball. And I don't think you guys want to play like that because close games can go either way. You can make a season or break a season. Look at the Minnesota Vikings last year and the year before that. But not only that, but a little bit of contract disruption with Barkley. Daniel Jones ends up getting the bag. A couple other
Barkley
guys got
doesn't.
paid, and Barkley doesn't. He gets franchise tag. Now, I think Barkley is a professional. I think he's been a model citizen while he's been there in New York. So I don't think verbally it's going to show, but I think there's going to be a little bit of tension within the situation there. And if truly they don't feel like they can give him a 2 to 3 year deal right now, probably the writing's on the wall that they're not going to do it at the end of this season, no matter what he does. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think internally there's going to be a slow movement away from that style as well. So that's why I think those yards come down. I think Barkley stays healthy. Honestly, I don't think it's an injury type of risk thing, but I think the yardage comes back down to earth a little bit more, simply because they want to be a little bit more balanced on offense. Wrapping up the Giants, let's move on down to the defending
Philly.
Super Bowl runner-uppers, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Philly. This one was a tough one for me too. But I'm gonna say D line too. I'm gonna say D line. I'm gonna say the acquisition of Jalen Carter for them, and already having Jordan Davis over there. This is very good for Carter. He was put in a very good situation for him. Really is all really up to just Carter now to be successful. And I hope that all his Georgia alum that's over there in Philly with him keeps him in line and keeps him motivated and keeps him moving towards the goal to be successful. I think with that being said, I think that D line has the potential to be incredible. Their fall last year was the run game, and I think they could potentially be really good against the run now, considering they're going to have this crazy rotation of these very young, talented D linemen in the middle. For my downfall, I'm going to say with all the acquisitions of the running backs, I just don't know how much life left Kenneth Gainwell is going to have on that roster with the acquisition signs of all the running backs and the trade that they just did. So I think that potentially Gainwell's numbers and career as a Philadelphia Eagle could be on the down slopes.
All right, I agree with you on the D line thing. that thing could be super scary. And this whole draft class got put into a good position. Number one, because you're going to a very good team with veteran leaders present in the locker room. Number two, you went to school with all these guys. Like they're set up nice. I want to see it play out because I do have some reservations about some things. But I agree with you. On paper, it's scary. It's scary to get younger and with the amount of talent that they add. For me though, the Kenneth Gainwell thing, I I like Kenneth Gainwell a lot. And you're right. You went and spent money on Rashad Penny, and then all of a sudden, I guess you get the opportunity to get DeAndre Swift. I don't think that was part of the whole plan, but he fell in your lap. They pulled the trigger on the deal, and it's another talent that it's tough to miss, or tough not to take a shot on, especially considering what they gave up for it. So one thing about those two running backs, though, I'll start there. Injuries have been just as big a part of their career as their talent up to this point. Rashad Penny, season after season, he was supposed to be the guy. Whenever he did stay on the field, very explosive, very good playmaker, but he missed a lot of time. DeAndre Swift, same way. On the field, extremely good talent, but
Of
availability
course,
wise
yeah.
for Detroit, it's probably why they moved on from him. So both of those things, coupled with the fact that Kenneth Gainwell, he's a dual purpose running back for them. He was 240 yards on the ground, 4.5 per touch on the ground. He also led all the running backs in catches last year and yards per catch at 7.5. So that dude's a weapon. Young guy. I really liked him last year. I like him even more going forward. I think he's going to end up being the best running back on Philly. I still think it's going to be a timeshare because I think that's what the way they want it to be. But I'm higher on Gainwell. I think he gets more play. I think he gets more run and more opportunities to make plays this year for him.
I think the only way that happens is if both these guys get hurt.
Yeah, I mean, come on, let's not kid ourselves. If DeAndre Swift comes out there and he puts together 14 to 15 games where he's healthy, it's going to be hard to get him off the field. I get that.
And
I
then the
totally get
Eagles
that.
are really going to be tough to stop.
But also in Detroit, he split time right down the middle with Jamal Williams the whole time too. So he was not like this lead. I got all the carries. I'm just eating all day, like an Ezekiel Elliott for the Cowboys or something like that. Like he split time from the get go, and I don't think they're with that depth. I don't think they're going to try to push it with him either. We'll see how it all plays out. But I like Kenneth Gainwell. For me, it's on the defensive side, as far as taking a little bit
Linebackers?
step backwards. No, it's the overall defense. They were seventh in the league in points per game at 19 points per game. We kind of chronicled as we were doing our weekly pick shows and stuff like that of how Philly was able to have that good of a season last year. Number one, we talked about the schedule. Number two, we talked about the fact that they were getting out the leads, man. They were getting out the leads. And when you
Yeah.
can get out the leads, man, you just turn those dogs loose. Now, if they can put together that same blueprint to where they're just getting out the leads again and turning that young dog pack loose again, then yeah, they probably could duplicate it. But something tells me, looking at the schedule and the fact that you're infusing a lot of young guys into the mix on defense, that there are going to be some hiccups. There are going to be some miscommunications going on. And I think that will have them slip out of the top 10 this year as far as the scoring defense goes. By no means am I thinking that they're going to just fall apart, but I think they're going to take a little bit of step back. Moving forward to the Washington Commanders, who I heard might have to change their name again, too. They might have to go
Really?
back to the Washington football team again for a little while. Yeah, somebody's got that thing trademarked or something, Commanders. It's just some words that I heard, and I don't know how much in depth it is to it. One article I read, but just something I heard. But Washington, who are you looking at for the rise?
On the rise, I got the entire organization.
That's
Entire
fair.
front office. I mean, you
It's
can't
very
be
fair.
as big as a dumpster fire as Washington was as an organization with all the lawsuits in the front office and Dan Snyder, and the whole thing was just, if you can get away from that guy and you can get away from him as being the owner, and they sell that and get a new owner, They're on the rise as an organization. You can only go up from here. From as bad as it was, you can only go up from here. And then, my guy on the down slope is Andrew Norwell, still on the physically unable to perform list, and potentially on the block of getting cut. And just trying to get healthy, so you can get out back out there and maybe take the physical and be able to pass. So he's on my downslope. I'm sure there's a ton of other guys that you can grab from this Washington team, like any of the tight ends over there. I mean, they're trying to always stay healthy, and you're always struggling to get them to have a good tight end. And every year Logan Thomas is going to be like this stud, and we're all waiting to see Logan Thomas. He comes out, and then he has a
Injury
tough
bugs
time.
last year.
He has a tough time staying on the field. He played 14 games last year. He's only played a full season twice. So, I mean, like I said, there's other positions I could have snatched up, but I chose the offensive line. Well, you could have went quarterback here, honestly, because you don't know what you're going to get with Sam Howell and who the starter's even going to be. But I ended up going Norwell. They signed him, and he's still injured, so we'll see what happens with that. How about you, Char?
No, it's that's why I always turn to you. We talking about trenches and stuff like that. You gotta keep it balanced because the offensive line and the defensive line, man, that dictates so much of the game. And you can have this pretty offense in KC or this pretty offense in Cincinnati, but the glaring holes are always, can you protect that quarterback? Can you keep that guy upright? And you're talking about an organization in Washington that's going to have a second year guy starting at quarterback as far as on paper goes right now. It's going to be extremely important to keep him safe and protected. So the Norwell thing is a big deal. And I agree 110% with your assessment on as far as the rise being the organization. You got class people there like Ron Rivera. You bring over Eric Bieniemy, coaching staff, class all the way, and lots of those players that Washington has on their team, true professionals. You talk about a Terry McLaurin and stuff like that. When you've got this seediness and this slime kind of going on at the top, it's gonna drip down. It's gonna happen. So I'm happy for Washington to be moving on and getting some new ownership in there. For me, I think the offense is going to be a little bit more fun to watch. It might be a no-brainer with bringing over Bieniemy. I don't know how everything's going to go with the trigger man and Sam Howell. We'll have to see that as that
Right.
develops over the off season here and get a better look at him. But I know Bieniemy can coach. There was no, Andy Reid wasn't just keeping him there to do him a favor.
Yeah.
Very integral part of their success over there in Kansas City. You're gonna bring him over with a coach in Ron Rivera who preaches discipline, preaches defense, likes to run the ball as well. I think they're going to be an interesting match, and I think there's going to be a lot of creativity. There's a lot of young weapons there at wide receiver that they can do some things with. So I think that is something that will be on the rise. Washington football will be a little bit more funner to watch. Funner is a word on offense, and then kind of the flip side on the defense. Top 10 unit last year, they checked in at 8th overall. Most of the rankings that I went through. And I think that one's going to take a little step back here, too. Again, kind of looking at the big picture with the tougher schedule that the East is going to face. And the fact that although I'm excited about the offense, I think there are going to be times, and it could be, a lot of times, to where that offense is a quick 3 and out, and you're
Down the
bringing the
stretch.
defense
Yeah.
right back in. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's
Down the
like,
stretch.
it can be a double-edged sword because you can have a great defense, but eventually they're going to run out of gas and not to mention just mental fortitude. When you're not scoring points on offense, you've witnessed it firsthand with your New York
It's
Giants.
huge. Yeah,
It's
it's
just
huge.
a matter of time before the defense is going to,
No doubt.
kind of cave in. So that's kind of where I'm looking. And again, there's still plenty of talent on Washington's defense, and I like the drafting of Forbes. They re-signed, the interior defensive lineman that they needed to. We'll see what happens with Chase Young. His name's been floating out there quite a while in possibly being moved, but still a very solid unit. Let's bounce up to the North, NFC North. Let's start it off with the Bears. What you
Yeah,
got
yeah.
for the Bears?
Yeah, yeah. Chicago Bears. Big shout out to Chicago. Um, everybody's Mixed feelings here on what I'm about to say. My riser is. I'm sure even from within the Running Routes community, there's going to be some people that have some stones to throw at what I'm about to say. But I think on the rise up there in Chicago, on the rise for me is Justin Fields. Now, before you start hitting me with rocks and trying to stone me, I just want to say that the numbers tell me that the way it's looking, he's gonna even have a better year this year, because first year he played 12 games and he only had 7 touchdowns and he threw for 1,000 yards, and that's terrible as a quarterback, right? But the next year he played 15 games, he threw for 2,000 yards and he threw for 17 touchdowns. And this year, he's going to have the most wide receivers he's ever had before. He's going to have the most fortitude in the offensive line that he's ever had in the trenches. And hopefully on defense, that squad's going to come together year two with all those young cats that they got over there already and have some nasty grit and come through and elevate as a team, not just Justin Fields elevating as a player. Because, the 2 years that he played, he definitely elevated as a player. He's still not where he should be as a quarterback throwing the ball, right? But he's not your conventional quarterback. And I think that these are some things that, moving forward, he's acclimating to, getting used to it. But also, too, he's had nothing but opinions to throw at. I mean, he's literally not had any receivers. So he's got receivers coming in this year. It's going to be really interesting to see what they look like when they get out there the first game of the season. So on my rise, I'm going to say, I got Justin Fields on the rise for them. Andrew Billings, D tackle for the Bears, is getting up there in age, and I think that potentially this one he could end up being on the downcline. They signed him to a 1-year deal. His best seasons look like potentially could be behind him. The bigger guys, you lose the burst, never get it back. We'll see what happens. Plus, that's a young defensive line. And he's just going to end up being maybe a rotation guy, so we'll see what happens. But that's my downslope.
Sure, you got to have a nice mix of veterans in there with the young guys, though, too. But I agree. There is a certain age that we all reach to where, time is just taking its toll on you and you're just a step slower. And it's just that's part of life. I agree with you 110% about Justin Fields. I mean, you look at the Bears, it's Justin Fields, it's hands down. And, we've had debates on this show, me and Brady in particular. But you laid out some nice work right there, and the only thing I can add to that is this is going to be his second year in the system, and it's the first time in the pros that he's had a back-to-back in the same situation. So I look for Justin Fields to take off. I look for him to be in the MVP talk at times during the season, and I think he's going to be phenomenal. You can look at the weapons that he's got now, and I like them, but I don't. I think this is a situation to where he's just going to be elevating everybody else's play. I think he's going to be much better as a passer this season, and definitely look forward to watching him. For my kind of downgrades, it's the defense improving from last year. I like the youth movement that they're bringing in. I like a lot of the stuff that they have going on already with Brisker that they drafted last year, Gordon at the corner. But I just think it's young unit and it's missing a lot of that interior from the linebacking core that's kind of been completely redone now. And the defensive line, I still don't feel like they have enough to get to the passer. They did address that during the draft, so I think they're working towards that. But I think this defense is going to be a work in progress,
Very young.
and it's going to still need time to improve. But I think on the flip side, the offense is going to be able to help kind of
They're very young. They're a very young defense to begin with. Their youngest guy is 29 years old. Their second oldest is Andrew Billings. I just think he's touching the back half of his career. I mean, he's that's just my opinion on it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I think they're a young team, and a young team moving forward. There's, that's where you want to be. It's a young man's game.
No,
This is the spot
they're
you want
doing
to
it
be.
in the right ways. They're doing it in the right way. I don't think they're there yet. I think If Roquan was still there, and a couple other pieces, then yes, having a nice mix of veteran with the fresh young ones, they could start to ascend this year as well. But I think that's going to be a little bit more of a work in progress. I don't see a whole lot of improvement there, especially considering how good the Lions offense is, how good the Vikings defense is, right there in their own division that they got to play. I think it's going to be tough for that side of the ball a little bit. Speaking of the Lions, the next
Yes,
team
sir.
up, what you got on them?
Yes, sir. On the rise. How do you not point out the defense? The defense is on the rise over here, people. We got Emmanuel Mosley we signed. Okay. If you're a Detroit Lions fan, you should be super excited about this. Cameron Sutton. Okay. We just signed Cameron Sutton. We should be super excited about that, right? You signed CJ Gardner Johnson, right? And then you go and you get yourself an incredible linebacker out of Iowa, folks. You guys are going to be excited about this one. Maybe even put his hand in the dirt over on the other side to shore things up with your big dog over there, Aiden Hutchinson out of Michigan the year before. But this Jack Campbell, folks, I think is going to be a real good one. He's a real good pickup. And it's man, I wish he could have been a Giant, but he's not. He's a Lion, and I think for that, folks, for that reason, you guys are going to be on the rise here. I just like the coach over there for Detroit. I just like what's going on over there. You guys got a lot of heart, a lot of grit. I like it. Moving forward, you've done some things that are kind of questionable on offense. I'm going to get to that right now, which I think struggle bussing down the street here is going to end up being your tight end room, because you get rid of TJ Hawkinson. This is your first year coming in, starting a season without TJ Hawkinson. Okay, TJ left in a trade, right? Ended up getting out of there. I mean, that's fine. You got some picks for him, but the numbers that he was putting up were pretty big for you guys. You got Brock Wright out of Notre Dame, a year 2 guy who's played well, and he had some good numbers last season. But he played 17 games. He only had 24 targets, and he had 216 games. You got TJ Hawkinson, played 7 games for you guys last year, had over 400 yards and definitely over 4 touchdowns. So the thing is this guy played 17 games for you, and he couldn't accumulate what you guys did with Hawkinson in 7. It's something to think about. I think for that reason only, not going out to try and shore up this position, or at least get a stud in the draft in this position to kind of like give some competition.
They did pick up a young tight end in the draft that lots of people were high on. I
Oh
hadn't
yeah.
heard a lot about him before. I think it's the Laporta kid.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
trying to
Sam
pull it
Laporte.
up
Yeah,
right
yeah, you're
now.
right. Very
Yeah,
very young unit. I think they're gonna.
oh, for
I
sure, young.
I think they're gonna take a step back. I think that unit overall take a step back, or you just won't lean on that unit as hard as you would. You go out, you get
Yeah,
the running back, you trade for the running back, you traded your running back, you go get you a running back. So I think the tight end.
Hawkinson's a all pro. I agree with you. That's a big task
Yeah, it's
to
the
just
first season without him, so.
overall change. So I agree with you there. And it's funny because we do talk back and forth, but it's amazing how much we're on the same page with a lot of this stuff, because for me it's the defense improves just overall. Now you went through and named all the individuals. I'll throw in the Rodriguez kid at linebacker too that shined for them last year. um, yeah, and under Dan Campbell, I think it's just the whole Lions organization right now. There's a good core finally going on in Detroit, and whether they're able to make the playoffs, win the division this year, which I'm thinking they are, and plenty of people are as well, yourself included. But just the vibes, everything is moving. It feels like in a very good direction. And when I look at what they did on defense, bringing everybody in that they did, those are solid players. They're not maybe your flashiest ones, excluding what's his name from that came over from Philly. But you talk about Cam
CJ
Sutton,
Gardner Johnson.
yeah, Gardner Johnson. But you talk about Cam Sutton, a stalwart for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Now he's probably on the back half of his career. There's
Right.
no doubt about it. But smart dude, going to make the right plays. And they were lost in coverage so many times last year. You bring over Emmanuel Mosley. who
San
comes from one
Francisco.
of the top ranked defenses in the league in San Francisco. So he's well versed and well coached as well. So I like that a lot because they were throwing out a lot of young corners last year and the year before that, and the secondary was a complete mess for them. They, they were fifth in scoring last year, yet they were barely over 500 in the record. Those two things don't add up unless you're giving up as many points as you're scoring. And we saw they were just in shootouts. You need a
Yeah.
stop here. You can't get the stop. You end up losing the game. It's a big deal. They went out. They addressed that side of the ball. So that's I'm in alliance with you on that. And then
Yeah,
on the other side of the
tight
ball,
end room not having veteran leadership for me was it,
I agree with you. On the other side of the ball, I look at the offense, and I'm skeptical about it. They were number 5, like I just mentioned, 26 points per game last year. I don't know if that clip can maintain at that clip. Taking away Hawkinson, taking away DJ Shark, who had a great bounce back year
Jamal
from the
Williams.
previous year. Jamal Williams was a complete head scratcher. That's got to be something internal that they went through that they just said no. You swap him out with David Montgomery, which I'm a David Montgomery fan,
If
okay,
he can
but
stay healthy.
he's
I
got
love him
more
healthy.
tread loose on his tires. Even though Williams has been in the league a couple years longer, Montgomery has got more tread done on his tires than Williams does. So I
Head
scratched my head
scratcher.
at that one. And then you go draft a running back, which I get the moves. You part ways with Swift, and maybe that's for the best. We'll see down the road. And you bring over Jahmyr Gibbs, which I wasn't crazy high on in the draft, but the kid is a talent. There's no doubt about it. But that's where you spent your draft pick. I like what they did on defense, getting Jack Campbell. Love that kid. I just would have wanted them to address a different thing. Then you look at their rookie that they drafted out of Alabama last year, missed most of the season, got to
Wide
play a
receiver.
couple of games last
Williams.
year. Yeah, Jameson Williams, and now all of a sudden he's suspended for the first 6 games with the gambling issue.
Wow.
St. Rob was phenomenal for them
Incredible.
last year.
Yeah, I called him too coming out.
But I think this year, my guy, and you minus the tight end room, like you said, if Laporta doesn't come in and really contribute to this offense, I think they could struggle in some areas. They got key contributions from a lot of
Guys that are gone.
no name wide receivers last year, and this year I think it's going to be a little tougher. And plus, I'm still not 110% sold on Jared Goff elevating more than he did last year. I think it's going to be
Right.
tougher, but
I agree.
Lions as a whole, I think they're going in the right direction. I just think top 5 in scoring offense. I think that's a little that's the ceiling for them. I think
I
that
agree.
starts a little bit considering everything. Let's bounce over to the Green Bay Pack.
Green Bay
What you got?
Packers. For me, on the rise. Easy for me. I really liked him coming out of college last year. Quay Walker, 121 total tackles, 75 total tackles solo. The kid's on the rise. He's playing well. I was even higher on Devontae Wyatt. I even think Devontae Wyatt will potentially have a better season this season than he did last year. But for me, I'm going Quay Walker. It is. Quay Walker is just a stud, a hell of an athlete. He played very well last year. 75 solo tackles. Led the team in tackles. He's a G. I expect that to continue. I don't expect that to be on the decline. And the kid played all 17 games. Absolute stud. For me, the decline, on the decline potentially is Jordan Love. I haven't seen enough from him in the past handful of games that he has played for the team. I just feel like you're just handing the keys over to someone in hopes of you sat long enough. This is good. I don't know what you see in this whole thing that he's played 6 games. In the 6 games he played, he had 2 touchdowns. He had 3 interceptions that season, so more interceptions than he had touchdowns. And then the next season he plays 4 games that year, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. I guess that's a good thing. But again, though, nothing really hopped off the page here. I mean, in the 10 games that he's played. He doesn't even have 100 throws. You're literally handing the keys to him. And I wouldn't have did this if Romeo Doubs wouldn't have said what he said. But he says that he could just do the same thing that Aaron Rodgers does. He doesn't see a difference. So I'm saying
That's a guy. That's
On
a
the
guy that
down.
wants passes coming his way.
No doubt, but you're on the down, cuz.
um, that's kind of surprising because you're usually not as quick to kind of throw dirt on somebody who hasn't really had that much of a window of experience. But
Yeah, but I
bigger
also
than
in
that,
the
Jordan Love's been
experience
around
that
for
he
3
did
years
get,
too.
I haven't seen
No,
anything
no, no,
that's
no.
like,
What
yo,
you're
I
saying is
can't
fair.
wait till he gets the keys.
What you're saying is fair. I agree. It's fair. For me, on the improve is this that Packers defense. I mean, you talk about Quay Walker and Wyatt on the line. They were disappointing last year, and maybe it had to do with just the whole vibe around the organization, just kind of treading water at that point in time with everything that's going on. But their defense, there's way too much talent on that defense for it to be, as subpar as it was last year. I look for the whole team to bounce back. They were mid-pack in defensive rankings. I think when we did our ranking show last year, just about all of us had the Packers in the top 10, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we
So
had him up there, yeah.
yeah, so I think they're back on the rise with that young talent and such. For me, the dropper might not be a fan favorite of this one, but it's Christian Watkins. He to me had a spectacular year. I mean, I had him on fantasy. I stashed him. He blew up. It was awesome to watch him in the games. He's a big play waiting to happen. Kid to me isn't a number one though. And then you couple that with Jordan Love, and there's going to be some growing pains with all that stuff. I think his expectations probably should be tempered a little bit more. Outstanding athleticism in the kid, but he had trouble staying on the field, which I don't like. He's a bigger guy that had trouble staying on the field that I don't like. And he's a thinner guy that had trouble staying on the field, which I don't like. So I'm gonna reserve my pick for him as far as not doubling his output of what he did last year. I think he ended up with like 7 or 8 touchdowns in that small window that he ended up playing, which was like 6 or 7 games at the end of the season. I wouldn't project him personally coming in and going double digit touchdowns just because he's going to play a full season, because I don't know if he's going to make it through a full season. Plus, there's a lot of competition there in Green Bay at a number of positions, wide receiver being one of them. So Christian Watkins for me might be an unpopular pick, but I don't think he's a number one. And just the numbers wise, I don't know if they drastically improved yardage, probably because you're looking at a full season, but I wouldn't look for touchdown numbers to go crazy with them. But we'll see how the quarterback situation shakes out, as you talked about. Um, Last on the list for the North is Minnesota Vikings.
Minnesota Vikings, for me, on the rise, I think, is Alexander Madison. Okay, he did not have incredible numbers last season, but the way the coaches are talking and the rumblings of let's trade Dalvin Cook, I just think that potentially, if this trade ends up getting pulled and he ends up getting out of here, they're talking about maybe Buffalo, they're maybe talking about who else where could he go? You know what I mean? But he played 17 games last year. He had 74 carries, 283 yards, 3.8 carries, but he had 5 touchdowns. So he's getting in there and he's scoring points. He didn't have a fumble last season. He's had 2 in his career. I just think that potentially with the rumblings of them talking about trading Dalvin Cook and getting Cook out of there, even though Cook was 1,000-yard back last season, I think potentially Cook's days are numbered, and Alexander Madison is the next guy in line. Definitely on the
He's
rise.
he's been the handcuff in fantasy football for Dalvin Cook for the last 3 years at least. The organization likes him a lot. I think Coach O'Connell for them came out and said, very glowing things about him, which further cements that Dalvin Cook is probably moving on. So yeah, he's going to get his opportunity. I have no doubt. He's a guy that can catch the ball in the backfield. He's shined any opportunity that he's received. So yeah, I think he hit the head
Then
on.
my downfall on a down slope. Love this guy. Stud out of Notre Dame. He's played 11 seasons. He's a hell of a safety. He's 34 years old. Harrison Smith, I think potentially could end up starting on the decline here. He's getting up there in age, and he didn't play all season last season. I just think that you just start reaching at that point, He played 14 games last season. He only had 85 tackles, 66 solo. The year before, 114, 83 solo. I just think that potentially could end up being on a decline here, people.
Harrison
Hell of a
Smith is had
safety, though. Love the guy.
yeah, yeah, he's had a hell of a career.
Stud.
And you're right, again, 34 is pretty old in football age. It's not maybe in regular age, but football age 34, especially for a player of his caliber and the style of play, which he's a old school hitter as well. He come down to thump. So yeah, I could definitely see that happening. Obviously, they drafted the sign out of Georgia last year, and he got injured. So, and I think they've invested a couple more picks in safeties this year as well. So I think they see the writing on the wall too. That's a good pick. For me, I think the defense improves for the Minnesota Vikings. In particular, the pass rush hasn't exactly been formidable for them over the past good handful of seasons. But you go over and you bring Jordan Hicks over and you bring Marcus Davenport over from the Saints. I like that mixing it in with Danielle Hunter. I think you improve the secondary a little bit through the draft and the free agency ads that they had, which will give them just a step extra to get to the passer. And I think the pass rush improves for Minnesota. And then on the decline, I'm worried a little bit about the offense because I like Alexander Madison, but Cook really hasn't lost a step yet. Now maybe they feel it's coming this season, but he's been putting up numbers. And you move
Yeah,
on
he's a
from Adam
thousand yard back.
Thielen. Yeah, you move on from Adam Thielen. Jordan Addison comes in drafted. Um, I worry about Kirk Cousins in the same breath that I worry about Jared Goff. I'm still always going to be probably to the death of me reserved about trusting those two particular quarterbacks full time. And then the way I watched their games play out and stuff last year too, against any top competition, their offense was shut down. They had trouble scoring. That New York game in the playoffs, for instance, the Dallas game when they played them, whenever they ran up against a stout defense, it was not good for them. So I have some concerns. I think that offense comes back down to earth a little bit is it, instead of being as explosive as they were last year. Moving down to the South, what you got for the Atlanta Falcons? Lots of
South on
moves.
the rise for me, Taylor Heineke. I mean, just how the hell do you
Ooh,
not, man? I mean, I don't know what the hell Washington was
that's your
doing
boy.
by thinking getting rid of this guy. But I just think I love Desmond Ritter coming out of college, out of Cincinnati so much. And I thought he was like the most, ready quarterback in that draft coming out. I thought he was going to be really good, and I thought that he had a really good chance to end up being a quarterback here after Mariota ends up leaving, until they signed Tyler Heineke. And then they signed Taylor Heineke, and I'm like, well, he's going to end up being the starter this year out of Old Dom. I think he's on the rise. Who do I think's on the fall? And don't think that it's just grabbing guys out of 30 year right now, but I think Cordell Patterson touching 32 in a pretty violent position that he plays as running back, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think that he's going to be pushing Bijan Robinson out of the way. They still have Taylor
Algier.
Algier. They still have Algier at a BYU. They also got
Gotta give
BJ
it to you.
Baylor. I just think that Cordell Patterson days are numbered. Maybe he's going to end up being a situational type guy. But either way, it's going to be on a decline there. That's my decline for Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I can see that with Patterson. He had a couple injuries last year too. He's always
Stud, though.
been good as being a situational type of guy, though. Too, I think he'll complement Bijan Robinson. But you're right, as far as being the lead dog, definitely going to have big time competition, especially you draft a guy in the top 10 that's a running back at your position. You better believe that they want to get the most out of them because we all know the longevity of running backs in this league. So I agree
Short.
with you.
Short.
Um, for me, it's the Atlanta defense. I love that they got aggressive and they went out and got people. You talk about bringing Calais Campbell over to partner with Grady Jackson or Grady Jarrett on the D line. Bud Dupree, mixed emotions about that one because he's been injured here the past couple of years. But you bring over Lorenzo Carter and you go get Jesse Bates from the Bengals. I like all the additions to that defense in that division with Carolina, the Saints, and the Bucks.
It's wide open. It's wide open.
Sneaky top 10 at the end of the year, looking around like Atlanta Falcons top 10 defense. I think it's a possibility.
Only because it's wide open.
It's that, and it's young, and they're all rebuilding. Maybe not the Saints, but the Saints have kind of been rebuilding since Drew Brees stepped away. So,
Yeah.
talking about Carolina and the Bucks, definitely in rebuilds. I think they have an opportunity to take a step forward on defense.
I see it.
For my, I'm gonna just call it my question mark. So that's kind of what I wrote down here on my notes. For them, it's the wide receiver depth. They let Zacchaeus go, who was a big contributor to them last year. He's now on the Philadelphia Eagles. They let Brian Edwards go, which has been a talent that just really hasn't grabbed his footing in the NFL. Now look at the rest of the roster after you get past Drake London, and it's not very impressive. I know that they want to run the ball first and foremost. Obviously, we talk about Bijan Robinson. We talk about Cordero Patterson. We know the coach from Tennessee wants to run the ball. That's where his bread and butter is. So, and then you have an outstanding / wide receiver in Kyle Pitts there at your disposal as well. But that's a concern for me. That's a concern, and I think that could hamper whoever ends up being the quarterback,
Tight end
whether
depth too.
it's Heineke or whatever.
Tight end depth too. They don't have no depth at tight end, because like after.
Well, they did sign
Pitts,
Jonnu Smith. They signed Jonnu Smith in the offseason, which I think is good. I've always liked Jonnu. He wasn't that much relevant when he went to the Patriots like I thought he would be, but I think he's still got skills and he's still young enough. So I'm not terribly mad about the depth there. Next on the list is the Carolina Panthers.
Carolina Panthers. My rise here, Hayden Hurst. Head scratcher on why Cincinnati didn't re-sign him. But he goes back to where he came from. Hayden Hurst goes back to he didn't come from he came from Atlanta, but Hayden Hurst goes to the Panthers. Yeah. And I just think that he's going to be on a rise there. Like potentially, that room's wide open, I think that he could potentially go over there and end up helping the little guy out at quarterback, He could barely see over the line, but he could look to the left or the right. So the tight end's there. I think potentially this could end up being a match made in heaven. You didn't even know it, On my downslope, I got Matt Corral on the downslope. I just thought that potentially he was going to get an opportunity considering how bad Baker Mayfield did and the Sam Darnold experience didn't work out. I'm figuring Matt Corral's at least got an opportunity to get a shot, but what happened? What transpired, people? They traded up, sold their soul, got rid of their buddy over there who was the only thing good on offense with Christian McCaffrey. They traded Christian McCaffrey away. They traded everything away to go ahead and try and rebuild here. I don't know. I think Corral's on his way out the door, just there to just be a backup. We'll see what happens. But I think Corral never really even had a chance to be on a rise.
Agreed. As soon as you said Matt Corral, I had flashbacks of talking to Henri, our good friend of the show, about Matt Corral, and he was super pumped about him and all this stuff. And I'll leave the details out, but I won that conversation, Rick. On the rise for Carolina, for me, it's the O-line. Lots of young talent been drafted here recently. They went and they signed Austin Corbett from the Rams the previous season. Christensen, both those guys battled injuries last year. Plus, you're getting the second year out of was it
Ikwonu?
Yeah. Second year out of him at tackle. I think that offensive line gels together. I know they're going to have to because they're going to be protecting the number 1 pick in the draft this year, and that's going to be massive, not only to this year, but to the growth of Bryce Young in the future. So I'm looking for that unit. It was ranked number 15 in most of the pro, football focus polls that I was looking at. I look for them to improve there. There's so much young talent with veteran mixes in there, and I look for them to take a step forward. Taking a step back, though, my faller is Miles Sanders coming over from Philly. phenomenal year last year. 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, and then he caught 50 balls for 500 yards and another 3 touchdowns. Hats off to the kid. He played his ass off, and there were rumblings that they wanted to get rid of him at the beginning of the season last year. Came out, simply balled out. I don't know if that's going to transfer over here, though. I think those numbers are going to come significantly down because there's going to be a lot of growing pains going on with Carolina. And I just have my doubts about Miles Sanders. So I think his numbers come down across the board, receiving and rushing. Um, Next on tap is the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, downfall. No, we're going on the uptick here. We got Derek Carr is on the rise, people. I think Derek Carr is going to have a good year over there with the Saints.
You sound like you're cheering for him.
They were saying over there, that you had you had John Gruden go down there and just try to help the Saints out with Derek Carr. Give them a push here, help you out. Get your Derek Carr rolling early and often, people. So I think Derek Carr is going to have a good year this year. And on the downfall there, I think it's going to be Jameis Winston, considering he's coming back from the injury, and I don't think he's going to get an opportunity to start, even though they're saying that he's still capable of it. So I think Jameis Winston on the down slope, and you got Carr trying to find himself on the slope, on the upper slope, on the upper.
I personally feel like you nailed it on both of those. For me, it's the offense, bringing over Carr, bringing over Jamal Williams, already good offensive line. I think Carr does have a bounce back year. I think I was talking to our good friend Tony about, he's like, man, you were so high on David Carr last year, and now you're, lukewarm on the Raiders this year. It's like just because Carr left, and I was like, to me, it was a mistake by the Raiders, and I'm not going to get into a Raiders tangent, but Derek Carr lacked his weapons last year. Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow were iced off on the shelf. He still had Devontae Adams, and Adams went bananas. Who was throwing him those passes? It was Derek Carr. Derek Carr did not have a good year last year, but you're going to bring him over. You're going to plug him into an offense with a good offensive line, which he didn't really have in Vegas, and you're going to tell him he can throw the ball to Olave, who balled out last year. Michael Thomas, when he came back last year, those first 4 or 5 games looked like the old Michael Thomas. He was putting up numbers. Sucked to see him get another injury, but they felt good enough about him within that rocky relationship to bring him back again. The Shaheed kid,
SMU.
Blazer. Yeah, Blazer. They found a nice little piece in there. So I like this offense. We'll see what happens with Kamara and stuff, but I definitely think it's the offense. I think it's, I agree with you on Derek Carr. I think they take a step forward. The Saints do. And then, and especially thinking back, Andy Dalton was putting up numbers for them last year. You're telling me Andy Dalton can do it and Derek Carr can't? Much higher on Derek Carr than I am Andy Dalton. No offense, Red Rifle, but I think it's an improvement. And then on the other side, it's been the mainstay for the Saints, but it's the defense. They lost a lot off of that defensive line, moving on from Davenport. Cam Jordan's getting up there in age. Now, they invested a lot of draft capital into it. I think they drafted Brian Brees, and I think they took a couple other guys off the top of my head, can't remember their names. But Demario Davis is getting up there in age. And that secondary is aging as well. When you're talking about Marcus May, you're talking about Tyrann Mathieu. Lattimore's still young. He's still in his prime. But those 2 safeties are getting up there. And I think the defense as a unit would fall out of my top 10 now. I know for a fact on the show last year we were doing our rankings. I had them in the top 10 there with all the talent that they've had and just the success that they've had year after year. That's always been a very strong unit. But I think that takes a step back this year. That's what I got for them. Moving down to the last one, that's going to be Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I got from my rise on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield's on the rise over in Tampa.
Wow. I like it.
But on my downslope, I hear Brady yelling at me already. My downslope is Kyle Trask. They just wanted him to work out over there in Tampa. And I just think that because of the Baker Mayfield signing, I think that indirectly is going to tell me that that Kyle Trask is not going to be able or capable of beating out Baker Mayfield in camp. So when the start of the season comes, it's going to end up being Baker the starter, and I think that'll end up being his demise, Kyle Trask. So my rise is Baker. My my not so rise, they left the yeast out, is Kyle Trask.
Moxie. Moxie is the word apparently that's tipping the cap totally that Todd Bowles wants Baker Mayfield and not Kyle Trask to be the leader of his football team offensively coming into the season. Um, for me, I don't know if I buy either one of these guys. I guess Baker's the better option to roll with there, but I'll leave that one
You
off the table.
guess? You
I'm not even going
guess?
to bite into that one,
You
Brady.
guess?
I'm going to go with some positivity here for your Buccaneers, and I'm talking the improvement comes in the defensive unit because I think it's going to have to play way better than it has the past couple of years. I think they kind of got to cool off a little bit with Tom Brady being there and the offense being as good as it was the past couple of years. It's the takeaways. I think the takeaway numbers go up for the Bucs because they're going to have to. 24th in takeaways last year. Very unbuck defense like, especially how good that unit's been over the past, man, you want to say decade, going back sometime. So I think that number is going to improve. And then on the downside, I'm looking at Mike Evans, and I'm looking at Mike Evans just because of the same QB situation that I'm completely not sold on there in Tampa. Um, I think Baker's going to have some success getting him the ball, but I don't know if they're going to, I'm not totally sold on White at running back and then the depth behind that, talking about Chase Edmonds. I feel like the Bucs needed to run the ball last year, and there was a better stable of running backs with Leonard Fournette to go to balance with White. And now Fournette's gone, and I'm just like, where are you going to find the running game to give Baker the play action pass to be able to get the ball deep to Mike Evans, and that's where he really makes his bread and butter. I think the whole receiving core as a whole is going to suffer a little bit because of this, but Mike Evans, 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns last year, was kind of a subpar season for him. I think it's going to take a little bit step further. I'm saying he gets under 1,000 yards this season, which probably would be the first time in his career, maybe since his rookie year, but I think he did it his rookie year as well. So that's my faller. I'll get some text messages from Brady later telling me he does not agree respectfully with me, but I'll take him. Get your ass back on the show. Moving forward, this is the last division in the NFC. We're going to go NFC West. We're going to start it off with the Arizona Cardinals. Talk to me.
So this was a tough one for me to pick, right? So I end up taking my riser here. Ends up being, I think the defense is going to get better, right? It has to, right? I mean, because of all the signings that they just threw a lot of money out there. Chris Barnes, they picked up, UCLA linebacker. They draft B.J. Ojolari. They draft Owen Popo. They signed Najee Sanders from.
They drafted him last year.
Oh, they drafted him last year. My fault.
Yeah.
My fault. Yeah, they drafted him. They drafted Cameron Thomas the year before. They signed Kazir White. And pick up Josh Woods, Chris Boyd. Okay, I mean, they got some guys on this team they went out and got, right? So I think that, with all the signings potentially, the defense could end up being on the rise here. I like B.J. Ojolari coming out of LSU. They got some good.
Nice young talent.
Yeah, they got some good talent that they added through, the draft. They got the offensive line that they signed with that they got with the first pick. Second pick was BJ. But they did a lot on defense in the draft. Drafted a bunch of cornerbacks, and Garrett Williams out of Syracuse could end up being a real stud. You got Clark out of Louisville, could end up doing something. Stills out of West Virginia, D tackle. So they put a lot of work in to the defense. They also, which was an issue last year, the offensive line to help out Kyler, which bleeds into my down slope. My down slope for me is going to end up being Kyler. I just think that it's tough having the injury that Kyler had, a non-contact related injury on knee where he's a mobile guy. I think potentially moving forward, this could be detrimental. His rollout game is literally the bread and the butter. If he doesn't have one, you don't have nothing. I don't think that this is going to be a good year. He comes back if he even starts week 1. I think it's going to be a tough one for him. And for that reason, I think he's on the downslope.
Yeah, I didn't think Kyler Murray because I already felt like he was on the downslope. But as you're talking and I'm thinking more about it, it could be a wrap for Kyler real soon, just NFL wise, period. Like, because you're right. If he's not able to bounce back, and I believe the timetable has him missing the first couple of weeks of the season as of right now. So regardless, he's going to miss some of the season. Um, yeah, it could be an open and shut case with him. I don't want to put that on him. I'm sure he's a good kid. I haven't been a fan of a lot of the stuff that I've seen action wise of him conducting himself on the field and then things I've heard, but I wish bad on no man. But it very well could be a wrap for him. Staying on the positive though, on the rise, I'm on the defensive side of the ball as well. One of the guys you mentioned, which was Najee Sanders, loved him coming out of Cincinnati last year, but he had a little deck stacked against him with Watt in front of him, with Zach Allen in front of him, and then Marcus Golden. Somebody's going to have to step up into that void. Lots of the youngsters that you talked about are going to be a part of that movement, with DJ Ojolari in particular, and Simmons they got in the linebacking core. Crazy good speed coverage. But I'm looking for Najee Sanders to take his 2.5 sacks that he was able to accumulate his rookie year in limited time and turn that into double digits this year. I think he's going to be a stud for them. Very much a bright spot on that defense. I'm curious to see how the Buda Baker situation, just on the quick tip, the Buda Baker situation, because I hear he wants to get out of town too. It would suck if they have to move on from him, because that definitely is a big piece to that young defense coming together and moving in the right direction. That would be a big loss for them. For my faller, I honestly wanted to just jump on the Kyler train, but I'm gonna go James Conner. Love James Conner. Always have loved James Conner when he started his career back in Pittsburgh. Pulling for him the whole time. Battled through cancer. Great story. Kid runs hard. I think he had a phenomenal year last year. A Jamal Williams-esque type of year last year. It was a pleasant surprise for the Cardinals. I don't know if he can duplicate that without the threat of the spread, with having Kyler back there and no D-Hop now, and that offense is going to change drastically. I don't know if he can just be the bell cow type of runner and duplicate the
I
success that
like
he
that.
had last year. So I'm going James Conner, taking a step back. I'm not falling off the map because I think he's still a wonderful goal line option for them. But right now,
Still a viable
he's
option in fantasy.
he's heads and tails. Touchdowns are relevant in fantasy, so I think he's worth monitoring. But I wouldn't put heavy draft capital into him.
Heard.
Um, but then looking behind him, that depth chart does not impress me at all. Usually, I can find a youngster that I'm just like, wow, well, he could definitely step up and take that role. I look at their depth chart there, and it's like I'm looking out over the Grand Canyon, and I'm just trying to find something. I can't see nothing. It's all blurry. So we'll see how that whole situation shakes out. Somebody's gonna have to tote the rock the whole season. Let's move it down to San Francisco. Who you got for San Francisco?
San Francisco is a crazy one for me. I'm going quarterback room here. I'm going Sam Darnold's on the rise. We don't know yet. Potentially, if you got the who is the outstanding Brock? So Purdy is going to be able to play week 1. They're pushing for Brock to play week 1. They don't know if he's going to play week 1. It's questionable. I don't even know if he's thrown a ball yet. We're going to have to get that confirmed. Hit us up in the comment section below if anybody's been to a San Francisco practice yet and have seen Brock out there slinging a rock. Let us know in the comment section. I don't know if he is, but I got Sammy on the rise, and I got Trey Lance on the fall. I think Trey Lance potentially coming back from this injury with the signing of Sam Darnold and his somewhat mobility potentially will be able to edge this one out because he's still coming back from a season-ending injury and potentially just not being on page and football ready when it comes time for him to put up a fight against Sam Darnold in the preseason. I'm going Sammy on the rise. I'm going Trey on the fall.
I like it. I'm gonna have to call audible for my riser because I had Sam Darnold as well. And I just thought real quick and it popped right in my head, and I can't believe I kind of overlooked him. That's Drake Jackson on the defensive line for San Francisco. Kid's an absolute stud.
USC.
He's the next it thing for the San Francisco defense, and he's gonna be able to eat even more with the season that Bosa was able to put together last year. And Bosa's always been a force since he's been in the league, but he was healthy last year. Defensive MVP, if I'm not mistaken, last year. So he's definitely going to be seeing even more coverage on that side of the ball, and that's just going to let Drake show off and showcase. So that's my riser right there. And then staying on the same side of the ball as far as the fallers go, I'm questionable about this Niners defense. I know they got a lot of talent there, but D'Amico Ryans was the mastermind behind all that stuff on defense that allowed Kyle Shanahan to just make that offense his baby, and that's all he's got to worry about. And now D'Amico Ryans is taking his talents down to Texas. I think there are going to be some familiarities. Obviously, somebody's going to step in and still have the continuity with the scheme practices, but there's going to be changes to it. There's going to be no doubt. Moving on from Mosley, moving on. I believe Jimmy Ward has moved on as well. There are a couple of pieces out of that defense that have parted ways, and I think they're going to take a step back. I don't think the unit's going to be as strong. I think that pass rush is still going to continue to be strong, but I don't think as a unit they're going to be as strong as they have been, minus D'Amico Ryans leading them onto the field. Next up for us is Seattle Seahawks. What you got for Seattle?
The Seattle Seahawks. I think as good as that secondary played last year and as good as Seattle played as a team last year, I think with the acquisition of Devon Witherspoon out of Illinois, I think potentially that secondary could be even better this year than it was a year before. So I'm going to go on my rise for the Seattle Seahawks. I'm going at secondary, man, because Traquan Woolen led the team in interceptions, with 6 on the season. I think he's going to potentially be able to play even better this year than he played last year. He was a stud as a rookie, and I expect him to just get even better this year with the height and speed and size that this kid has already. The intangibles are sick, and look out for Seattle secondary moving forward. I think on the downslope, I think is Davin Bush, an acquisition over from the Pittsburgh Steelers, who's coming over here, an undersized linebacker at 5'10", 224, and he's got the speed and the lights to just go get anybody out there in the flat that he needs to go get. And he had an incredible season last season on the Pittsburgh Steelers, and one of his only seasons that he played for Pittsburgh all the games. So I just think I think that since he had a good season on Pittsburgh last season, potentially he's going to come over to Seattle and not have such a good season. I think that potentially Davin Bush could end up being on the downslopes.
I'm going to play for my riser. I'm going to play off of your secondary thing. And I'm going to go Seahawks sack numbers go up. They've invested a lot of draft capital the past couple of years in the defensive line as well. And with all the before mentioned people that you rattled off for the secondary, including Quandre Diggs and Love that they signed from the Giants to go with those 2 stud corners, not to mention Michael Jackson back there in the secondary as well, who had a fantastic season for them. I think the sack numbers go up for the Seahawks. Considering what the Cardinals are going through, considering what San Francisco is going through, and considering the Rams' offensive line is not very good still, I think those numbers are going to go up. They were pretty low for a Seahawks team that was so good last year, and I think those numbers go up. From my faller, probably won't be popular as well. Probably picking on some big name guys on this show, but Kenneth Walker, 1,000-yard back last year, fantastic rookie campaign. But digging in the numbers, he was only averaging 15 touches for 69 yards last year. And you can say, well, he didn't play, he didn't start as a starter. It was Rashad Penny, but the kid played in 15 games last year. I didn't like the per rush he was getting, and he's a slight guy. Kid's 5'9", 211, little stocky guy. I think the fact that they took Carbonet out of UCLA in the third round, which is a bigger type back, I think is going to continue to be a committee with him. I don't think he reaches the 1,000-yard rushing mark this season, my personal opinion. So I got him on the fall. By no means am I saying his career is over and he's a bad player, because I like Kenneth Walker a lot. I just think that the rushing numbers aren't going to increase. They're going to decrease as far as that yardage goes. Not to mention you draft a wide receiver to pop him in with a quarterback that you gave some money to this year with Geno Smith, adding him to Lockett and DK Metcalf. So I think they're going to want to throw the ball a little bit more this year as well. Last team in the NFC that we're going to touch on is going to be the Los Angeles Rams.
Los Angeles Rams, for me, on the rise. How do you not go and talk about Cooper Kupp, who had a phenomenal season a season ago? Just one entire season removed from a year ago, he had incredible numbers, almost 2,000 yards at receiver. He played all 17 games. He had 191 targets with 145 receptions, 1,947 yards, 13.4 average, and 16 touchdowns. And then the next season he only played 9 games, 75 receptions, had 98 targets, he averaged 10 yards a catch, he had 6 touchdowns. I think this year gets back to form. He's a 1,000-yard receiver this year. I'm going Cooper Kupp on the rise, people. I'm going on a decline, and it's probably not going to be for long, because you might end up finding a guy at the end of this season. But I think the defensive back room is going to miss the tenacity and the voice of reasoning. Jalen Ramsey, I think it's going to be a big deal over there. The secondary is going to end up hurting. And because of the fact that the defense is not going to be playing so well because of that secondary room hurting, Cooper Kupp's going to be able to eat because they're going to be playing from behind, and he will end up getting a lot of yards because that's going to be the scenario.
We like it when it all comes together. We like it when it all comes together. It fits nice. I ain't mad about that. Yeah, Cooper Kupp is a beast. He's an absolute stud. For me, it's Cam Akers. Cam Akers on the rise. First 3 games of the season with Matthew Stafford, 100-yard game each game. Full year removed from that knee thing that he had the previous year. You give him another full season. He ended up rushing for 780 yards, 7 touchdowns on the year. I think he's a 1K running back. I like him still a lot. You're bringing back a healthy offensive line to go with. A healthy Matthew Stafford, at least at the start of the season, healthy Cooper Kupp, and this whole team, just the injuries were they were riddled with them, and they were limping through the whole season. With your John Wolford was starting. I forget the other kid that they had to put in there. It was a mess on offense. So it's no wonder, with no threat of a passing game, that you can't get a running game going. Not to mention their offensive line was banged up and not good last year too. So I think they get all that corrected. I think Cam Akers comes out. I think he has a really good season this year. Double-digit touchdowns, 1,000-yard rusher. For me on the decline, though, and it might play into the same thing, it's the defense. It's the defense as a whole. You touched on Ramsey being gone and that secondary hurting. They also lost Hill and they lost Taylor Rapp. Not studs, but mainstays in that defense going
And
back
Leonard
to when
Floyd.
they were the top ranked defense in the secondary.
Leonard Floyd as well.
Yeah. In particular, I think they're going to struggle because they lost their 2 run stuffers. You're talking about Greg Gaines going to the Bucs, and you're talking about A'Shawn Robinson going to the Giants. I think that rush defense is going to suffer significantly. 13th rank against the rush last year on defense. I think the coupling that with what you pointed out about the defensive secondary and the losses of those two individuals right there, I think the defense is going to have their hands full. The Rams are going to have their hands full on defense, and the rush defense in particular is definitely going to drop down. And that does it. That does it for our NFC show, Risers and
Let's go.
Fallers. Thank y'all for joining us. Yeah.